So today I wanted to talk about something new called payment channel networks. So a Lightning network, which you might have heard of, is a type of payment channel network. And this was created by Poon and Drish, yeah, around 2016 or so. Okay, and it took a few years before the Bitcoin community actually adopted the Lightning Network. So this is addressing the problem of scalability in blockchains like Bitcoin. So what is the scalability problem? So what is it? Let's talk about the transaction throughput. So Bitcoin generates roughly a 1 MB block. That was what Satoshi said initially, okay, based on his experiments. Okay. And of course, apparently he hadn't set the 1 MB limit initially when he released Bitcoin, but he released it in the first year or so, right? After realizing that people could launch attacks if you had an arbitrary size block, right? You might want to think about that. And it's an interesting story of how Satoshi actually incorporated this 1 MB limit into his code. Okay, he did it by stealth for very interesting reasons. Anyway, that's you can read about it if you're interested. So we have roughly a 1 MB block, and I think the limit may have gone up to 2 MB based on some modifications made, in the Bitcoin community in the source code. But roughly, let's assume it's 1 MB, and you have a block arriving every 10 minutes. Okay, that's what it's been set for. So this is not a very large amount of information getting added to the Bitcoin blockchain. Okay, every 10 minutes you have hardly 1 MB, and that translates to hardly 7 transactions per second. And that's a ridiculously low throughput if you think about it. Things like Visa and MasterCard and so on allow tens of thousands of transactions per second. Right? And if you want everybody in the world to use only Bitcoin, then you might need even more than that, like even hundreds of thousands or even a million transactions per second, right? In an ideal case. So, but the point is that this is order of magnitudes away from a global payment system. Okay, so transaction throughput is extremely low. And secondly, what about the confirmation time? So the confirmation time, as we know, is, if you take it as 6 blocks. Of course, there are some assumptions for that. We saw that we are assuming that the attacker has only 10% of the hashing power, right? When we say this 6 blocks, and we are assuming that he can do a double spend with a certain probability, 10 to the power of -3 or something like that, right? What we discussed in earlier lecture. But even 6 blocks corresponds to a long time. It's 1 hour. So this is a big problem. Suppose you want to buy coffee with Bitcoin. You don't want to wait 1 hour, right? Only then get the coffee, right? The person receiving the money should ideally know that he got it immediately, so that he can give you the goods in return, right? So confirmation time is very high. So this is very low, and this is very high. There is another issue which the Lightning Network attempts to solve, and that is the transaction fees. right? So why is the transaction fee high? Well, partly it's because of this. You can only have 7 transactions per second, and since Bitcoin is, let's say, a hot payment method, or it's people just want to buy Bitcoin as investment, so you need a lot more than 7 transactions per second. So what happens is that your transaction pool gets full. At any particular miner, his transaction pool gets filled up, and he gets to choose roughly 1 MB from these. Right? So which transactions get in? The ones paying higher transaction fee. Okay, so there's a competition now because there is less space in the blocks. So whoever pays more transaction fee, his transactions will likely get it. Because the miners want to make as much money as possible. So higher transaction fee means higher chance your transaction gets. So transaction fees are very high over here, right? And so again, if you want to buy coffee and your transaction fee is, let's say, $1,000, I mean, of course you convert, it may be a fraction of a Bitcoin, but that might translate to like hundreds of dollars or maybe $1,000, right? And that doesn't make sense, right? So of course the transaction fee of Bitcoin varies over time. Periods of the day when people try to do lots of transactions, the transaction fee will be high, and maybe certain periods of the time, maybe night time in, let's say, the Europe or US, where people are not so interested in making transactions, maybe the transaction fee will go down because the congestion of transactions in the network will be quite low, right? So it depends on the time of the day, but transaction fee could be high. Okay, so it depends on transaction load on the network. And in a bad case, it could be at least tens of dollars, okay, which doesn't make sense for micro payments. So micro payment is a small amount of money which you pay. Let's say you go to a grocery store, you buy something for a few dollars. That would be a micro payment. And putting that sort of a transaction on Bitcoin doesn't make sense on the Bitcoin blockchain if you have to pay 10 times that as your transaction fee. Right? So people have been wondering how to solve these problems. People have different ideas. They have ideas of how to maybe just push in more transactions over here. Maybe you reduce the time interval and so on. Okay, but you have to come up with clever ways to do it. Because you remember, if you reduce this 10 minutes a lot, you have a lot of forks. The blockchain may start looking like this. Right? There may be multiple blocks created over here. So reducing the time interval or just increasing the block size will cause other problems like forks, which make the blockchain unstable. But people have come up with innovative solutions, and one of the most clever ones is these payment channel networks. Okay, so what do payment channel networks do? Well, they actually make the payments off the chain. So we don't have time in this course to look at on-chain scalability solutions. So on-chain means you don't make payments off the chain. Everything is recorded on the chain. But in off-chain payments, payments are not recorded on the blockchain. So this is quite a remarkable thing. How is it even possible to not record transactions but still make transactions, right? Because after all, the idea is that unless a transaction is on the blockchain, the payment is not made, right? If I tell you I've paid you some Bitcoin and I don't record it on the blockchain, are you willing to accept that payment? So how are we going to do this? I mean, how are we going to have payments off the chain, not recorded on the chain, but still somebody has to be sure that he has got the money? Okay, so let's think about it. And this is done in two major steps. Okay, so first, let's think about the real world. A real world analogy. Okay, so let's think about how we make payments in real life. So say that there is an ATM, and somebody let's say goes to the ATM and withdraws a lot of cash. Let's say a person A. So he goes here, he withdraws cash, right? And maybe B does the same. B also withdraws money. Okay, so they have a lot of cash with them, and now they pay each other. So they transact, right? Maybe they are just, let's say, two shopkeepers, right? One guy sells certain things, one other guy sells something else, right? And so A buys something from B and B buys something from A, and they keep transacting with the cash. So this happens a lot, right? So they withdraw, let's say, a lot of money, let's say 10,000, 1 lakh, whatever, right, each, and they make a lot of payments with cash to each other. And after some time, so let's say that this is done in this fashion. Initially they withdraw, or let me actually mark this 2 as being step 1 where they withdraw. This is step 2 where they transact. And later on, let's say that B has a lot of cash, maybe too much of cash, and he wants to deposit in the bank. He could go and maybe deposit it. And of course, A2 could go to the bank, right, and at some point deposit his money, right? So let's think about it. So they first withdrew money, they exchanged a lot of money, kept buying things from each other. And then one of them said, maybe I have too much of money now, too much of cash. So I want to deposit it in the bank so that I get some interest at least. So he deposits it in the bank, and of course A2 could do the same. So how much of these transactions are recorded in the bank's ledger? Okay, so which of these is recorded in the bank's ledger? Let's think about it. So first of all, one is recorded, which says that A and B have withdrawn some cash. What about 2? Is this recorded in the bank's ledger? And obviously no, because they paid each other with cash. And 3 is also recorded. Okay, so this is a debit, right? Because cash has been withdrawn. The account is actually, something is subtracted from the account, and here it is credited. So this has been recorded, 1 and 3 has been recorded, but 2 has not been recorded. Okay, so if I have to take this analogy to the Bitcoin domain, essentially these transactions which I have labeled 2 are something like your off-chain payments. So they are actually done in the real world, but they are not recorded in the main record. So here in this analogy, they are not recorded in the bank's ledger, or the government or whoever, right? No central, let's say, registry has this particular information. But initially, to get started, they need to do something on the main registry because the money is there, right? The money is initially in the bank. And in our case, of course, the money is in the blockchain. So they will have to make some initial transaction and maybe some final transaction if they want to deposit the money on the Bitcoin blockchain. But once they have sort of withdrawn the money from the Bitcoin blockchain, they can make a lot of transactions. So let's see how that is done in off-chain networks. So I'm going to only talk about a high-level idea of how it all works, and in the next lecture we will talk about fine detail. Of payment channel. Okay, so what we want here is that A pays B multiple amount of times and it's not recorded in the Bitcoin blockchain. So how are we going to do this? So let's say this is the Bitcoin blockchain. So what A and B are going to do is that they are going to let's say put a transaction here, which I am going to call the funding transaction. Okay, so this is an initial, you can think of it as a withdrawal from the blockchain. Okay, so somebody withdraws money, and how are they going to do it? Well, A and B are both going to put some money in. This is the transaction, and let's say they put 1 Bitcoin in. Right? And we'll have to think how to take care of this output. So this is the input, and there's going to be an output. Okay, so both of them have sort of locked their money in this transaction, and this is some sort of a smart contract, you can think of it. So both of them have locked their money in over here, right? And what we want is that they should be able to use this smart contract in order to pay each other, but that doesn't get recorded on the blockchain. That's what we want. But here you remember that these are all untrustworthy parties. So you want this to work even if A and B do not trust each other. That is where the tricky part comes in. So how are we going to do this? So suppose A has, both of them have taken a transaction and they have locked their money here. Okay? Now the problem is that one of them can run away, right? And then what's going to happen, right? You want the other party to be able to get his money back. Okay, so what we are going to do is first of all here we are going to say that this output can be spent. So there is a 2 BTC here. We are ignoring the transaction fee. So it can be spent, first of all, if both A and B unlock it. So what this means is that it can be spent if a transaction is created which is signed by A and B. Okay, so A and B both sign it and they can create a new transaction. Okay, let me just put a different color here. So this particular transaction, this is the funding transaction. Okay. And let's say that this is a transaction which is actually going to sort of end the particular smart contract, right? Okay, but this is saying that I'm locking 1 Bitcoin each into the smart contract. Okay, so what I want is this. So A initially has 1 Bitcoin, B has 1 Bitcoin. But if A wants to pay a small amount, let's say 0.1, B should effectively have 1.1 and A should have 0.9. Okay? And let's say that A wants to pay another 0.1. B should effectively have 1.2, A should have 0.8. But if B pays, let's say 0.3 here, then it should become 1.1 and 0.9. Right? So their balances have to somehow get updated, but these are not recorded on the blockchain. Okay, so the first aspect of creating this payment channel, that is done with the funding transaction that is recorded on the blockchain. Okay. But what we are doing here is the balances are getting updated and this is not recorded. On the blockchain. And let's say at this point in time that B wants to quit, what he would have to do is he would have to create a transaction like this which spends from this initial funding transaction, and it should say that pay, let's say A, and how much would A get over here? 1.1, and pay B 0.9. Right, so let me just draw that a little bit more clearly. So A gets 1.1 and B gets 0.9. And this should be what the transaction is which they put on the blockchain. And this would have to be signed by both A and B. Okay, so what has happened here is that B says, I've initially locked my 1 Bitcoin and I've spent a lot with A, but after some time I'm tired. I want to actually use this 1 Bitcoin which is locked in this transaction. I want to use it elsewhere. I want to pay C or D or something like that. So I quit this smart contract and I create another smart contract. And this I put somewhere, I just broadcast onto the blockchain. Right, and this maybe goes in over here, and after this I can spend the money. Okay, so let's see, from here onwards A and B can spend their money. On the blockchain. Okay, so here their money could be spent only among each other, and we'll see how to do that. Right? But the money is initially locked and they can only pay each other. And here, but after they have withdrawn, they're withdrawn from the smart contract, any one of them has quit. Right? He deposits a transaction like this which is signed by both of them. And now both are free to spend their money in any way possible. Okay, so the analogy of the cash which I gave earlier doesn't exactly match over here, because remember that A could have spent his cash anyway, and he didn't have to give it only to B. He could have spent it with anyone else. Whereas here it's slightly different. The money is locked in a smart contract which is only between the two of them. And A can pay B a little bit amount of money and B can pay A a little bit amount of money, right? And they can keep doing that for arbitrary amount of time, but that is not recorded on the blockchain. And finally, if anybody wants his money back so that he can spend with any third party, he should broadcast a transaction like this which spends from this initial funding transaction. And this particular transaction should correctly divide the 2 Bitcoin into the initial 2 persons according to the latest balance that they have. Okay, and in this case it is 1.1 and 0.9. Okay, so we'll have to see how exactly to do that, but suppose it works, what have we achieved? So what we've achieved is that A is paying B and B is paying A multiple amounts of times, potentially infinite number of times. I mean any number, there's no bound on it. And none of this is actually recorded on the blockchain. And we said they end up with, let's say 1.1 and 0.9. And only these two are recorded on the blockchain. So this is quite amazing. We'll of course have to see how to achieve this, but if we succeed, what we are saying is that they can do thousands of transactions between them, and none of that is recorded on the blockchain. Only the initial withdrawal, which locks the money between them, and this final return of the money to the blockchain, you can say, or release of the money, that is recorded on the blockchain. So as long as the Bitcoin miners are concerned, all that they know is that initially A and B each sort of locked up 1 Bitcoin each in a smart contract between them. And then finally they returned the money to the blockchain to each other in this fashion, right? They divided it and then each of them is free to spend this amount. That's all that the miners know. They don't know what has happened in between. And thereby we have increased the transaction throughput effectively of the blockchain, right? Because though the blockchain is recording 7 transactions per second, in the real world we can make much more payments by this sort of a scheme, right? A and B can pay each other any number of times. Okay. But getting this to work is not trivial, because how do you do something like this? So we said that whenever somebody wants to quit, he has to put the correct amount, the correct balance of the other party, right? So B of course is saying 0.9 and 1.1. But what if B tries to cheat and say that the whole 2 Bitcoin is mine, right? And 0 belongs to A. That would be cheating. But of course you can see right away that would not be easy for B to do, because the transaction has to be signed by A, right? So A has to sign the transaction also for it to be valid, to be put over here. So the smart contract is doing something intelligent. I mean, it's smart enough so that B cannot arbitrarily cheat. Okay. But at the same time, what if A refuses to sign something like this? What if he's malicious and he says that I don't want to quit the channel, I just want to give you a hard time, right? What if, so let's say A's balance is 0.1 and B is 1.9, and B wants his money back, but A says I am not willing to release the money, I want to give you a hard time, so I won't sign this. Now B's money is locked up here, his 1.9 Bitcoin is stuck over here, right? Because he's not able to create a transaction, a spending transaction like this, because A refuses to sign it. Okay, so what we want is that any party should be able to quit. So let's say what we want. either party should be able to quit at any time. At any time. Okay, because it's his money after all, and if he doesn't want it locked up in that smart contract between the two of them, then there should be nothing to stop him. Okay. So now the spending transaction must reflect the current balance in the payment channel between them. Okay, so this whole thing that we have created is called a payment channel according to Poon and Ria. That's the term that they use, because this is like a channel and they can pay each other any number of times, right? And this is all done off the chain. So spending transaction must reflect the latest balance in the payment channel. Let's say latest balances of both parties in the channel. Okay, so that's a little bit tricky, because what if one party tries to cheat? And the third is it should work. So essentially this it should be robust to either party being malicious. Let's say this the spending transaction, let's say the closing of payment channel must be robust to malicious behavior. And malicious behavior could be anything. It means that any one of the parties might not follow the protocol. Malicious means don't follow the protocol. By one party. Maybe I should say any one party. Right? So any one of them might try to cheat and be malicious. Right? So of course here we are not allowing certain types of attacks where the attacker controls 50% of the mining power or something, because then he can do anything. Even if the spending transaction is a valid one, it's correct, he might just not include it in his block. So we are just, our threat model is saying that initially two people get together, let's say that they don't have enough mining power to do anything fishy, but they create this payment channel by initially creating a funding transaction, putting a funding transaction here, right? So they lock money here and then they pay each other off the chain multiple times in the real world, right? So they are saying, I am paying you 0.1 or 0.01 or whatever, and they update their balances based on these payments. So this is called a payment channel. And finally, any one of the parties, A or B, can quit. He says, I want my money back, which is locked in this transaction. So he should be able to create this spending transaction, but it should correctly reflect the latest balance. It shouldn't reflect an old balance, and it should be signed appropriately by both of them. Okay, so the initial transaction is saying that this output can be spent only by a transaction which is signed by both parties. Okay, so the public keys of A and B are here, recorded over here, right? Or at least they're recorded in the outputs over here, right? And so we know which particular public keys. So of course, what I haven't drawn is that there are some transactions here already in the blockchain, right? These could be somewhere earlier in the blockchain. Right? So these two transactions were used to create this transaction which was put here. Right? So everybody knows the public keys corresponding to these inputs. Right? And of course these two would have to be signed by A and B. Right? Because it is taking from these two inputs. And it says that both A and B have to create a transaction together which spends this money which has been locked. Okay, and this has to be done, this has to work out even if one of the parties is malicious. So it's possible that one of the parties might actually, let's say, go offline, maybe his machine crashes or whatever, right? Or one of the parties dies, passes away, right? And then the money shouldn't be locked. Right? So even if, no matter what happens to the other party, anybody should be able to quit with the latest money that he has in this payment chain. Okay, so that is one part of the problem. We'll have to see how to do that. But what have we achieved till now? So what we have achieved is our original analogy where we showed where A and B withdrew money and they paid each other. And we've sort of achieved that using a smart contract between A and B, right? Where they initially say I'm putting in so much money and I can keep paying, we can keep paying each other a small amount. But this is not what we want finally, right? We want anybody to be able to pay anybody, right? A should be able to pay anybody, E or F or whoever, right, in the world. You don't want to do it just between two parties because that has limited utility. Because A might have only, let's say, 5% of his transactions with B in the real world, and maybe he has many more transactions with other people, maybe with arbitrary people. And this is not going to work for all of that. Then he would have to have a payment channel with everybody else in the world. And then you would have to have funding transactions for arbitrary pairs of people, which doesn't make sense. Right? Then you're just going to fill up the space in the blockchain just with these funding transactions. So that's not going to work. So for the moment, let's just keep this idea of a payment channel and let's assume that it works. Okay, so A has a payment channel with B, and let's assume that works. We'll look at the details maybe in the next lecture. But how can, let's say, A pay, let's say, any arbitrary person? So this is an issue which we have to think about. And so it's another brilliant idea. So the first idea is itself quite brilliant, I would say, having this smart contract where they pay each other, because already it's increasing the scalability, at least if people are making a lot of payments to each other. Right? You have two people making a lot of payments to each other. But if we can solve this problem about how to pay an arbitrary person, then that would be really powerful. And in fact, the Lightning Network achieves that. So let's assume that we have payment channels between multiple people. Let's say that A has a payment channel with B. There's a channel here. B might have a channel with C. And C might have a channel with D. D might have a channel with E, and so on. Right? So there are these various channels that they have created. Each of these is an independent channel created with a smart contract, right? So each of them has a funding transaction. Okay, and so B might have with F, for example, and F might have with G, and so on, right? And G might have with, let's say, H, right? And H might have with D, right? Let's say with D. So there are lots of these payment channels set up, and we sort of, let's assume that we've figured out how to manage one channel. So each of them could make small amounts of payments to each other, right? And of course, we want to do it in a clever way so that these are not recorded on the blockchain, but also they can be done fast. right, and with low transaction fees. So that would solve the other two problems which we mentioned at the beginning of the lecture. So, but how are we going to make payments between arbitrary people in this network? Okay, so F might pay, let's say, K. Right? K pays, maybe there's somebody J over here. Right? So this is called the Lightning Network. So it's a network of payment channels. There are only two parties in each payment channel, right? And if you look at it as a network, as some sort of a graph, then it might look like this. And now what I want to do is, I want to make arbitrary payments between people in this Lightning network. So suppose A wants to pay E. Okay, so let's say that A wants to pay E 0.1 Bitcoin. He should be able to do this without recording his chain on the blockchain, right? And he wants it to be fast and with low transaction fees. So let's just write that down. What we want, not recorded on blockchain. It should happen fast, so there should be fast confirmation. And third, it should have low transaction fees. Okay, so clearly, I mean, if you're doing it, if you're not recording it on the blockchain, I mean, in theory, you should have zero transaction fees, right? Because, I mean, you're not paying the miner anything. It's not getting recorded. But of course, you will have to pay some fee in order to incentivize people, right? If you think about it, how is A going to pay E? He will definitely need cooperation of people in between, because they are the ones who have smart contracts which lead up to E. So some fee would have to be paid in the Lightning network itself. Okay, but I mean, definitely you're not paying the miners, so you can assume that the transaction fee is going to go down. So let's say that initially, let's say that everybody has, or let's say A has put in 1 Bitcoin, B has put 2 Bitcoin here, and let's say B has locked up, let's say 1 Bitcoin here, and C has got, let's say 3 Bitcoin. And in this channel, let's say C put 4 Bitcoin and D put 5 Bitcoin. Okay, and let's say here they put 1 each. Okay. So remember that there are funding transactions for each of these, and this is the amount that they put into that funding transaction is what I've written here below each channel. Okay. So now A wants to pay E. So how is he going to do it? So let's think about it. One way to do it is that he uses this path. So A finds a path to E. Okay, and A, B, C, D, E is a valid path. I mean, and of course there are other paths. He could go A, B, F, G, H, D, E. Right, and I mean, it's a research problem, right? Which path should he use? And normally somebody might use a path where he gets the lowest transaction fee. Okay, but the real Lightning network is a little bit more complicated than that. So some of my students are looking at these issues. Because not only do you want what I've written over here, but you also want anonymity. Right, so that's so A is paying E, but and you want to have B, C, D involved, and so how do you sort of have some amount of anonymity, right? So if the government, for example, is controlling node C, you don't want them to know about A's payment to E. That's what I mean by anonymity. Okay, and how is that possible, right? So there's a trade-off. If the more anonymity you put in, the more you might hit these other things like fast confirmation and so on, right? There's some sort of a trade-off which research people keep talking about. Right, but those are all research issues. We are not going to delve in much detail into them. So let's say that A finds a path and he wants to pay 0.1. So what is going to happen over here? So suppose he pays 0.1. Eventually, what you want is that 0.1 money flows in this direction. Okay. So E has got his 0.1, right, and A has lost his 0.1. So the balances, let me just write the balances here. This becomes 0.9. Okay. And what would this become? This would become 2.1. Now this balance, B is paying C, so this becomes 0.9. This becomes 3.1. This becomes the latest balance. This goes down by 0.1. This one increases by 0.1. This goes down by 0.1. This increases to 1.1. Right? So all the channels have had to be updated just for the single payment of 0.1 Bitcoin. And of course, we are neglecting what fees have been paid in between and so on. Right? Those are minor issues. But all the payment channels would have to be updated. Okay? So B has overall not lost any money, right? He has got 2.1 here and 0.1. So overall, his 3 Bitcoin is still with him, right? That's fine. But there is something happening over here. His money here is increasing on this channel, but he's sort of losing money here, right? So those of you who are still remember your JEE days, right? When you have some sort of a capacitor, right? And you have charge accumulating here, and or charge, right? You have charge coming here and charge electrons moving off here, right? So it's something like that, right? Where money is sort of accumulating on one channel of yours and it's sort of decreasing on your other channels because you're paying out to somebody else. Okay? And of course, actually in the Lightning Network, you would give some amount of fee to B. So B's total amount would increase a little bit, about 3, but hopefully it's not comparable to the fees that you pay on the actual Bitcoin blockchain. Okay? So they have to pay each other, right? And so the amounts change in this way. So now let's change it a little bit. Let's say that D pays A. Let's do another thing. So A finds path to E. Let's maybe complete that. And A pays the next, let's say the neighbor. Who pays its neighbor and so on. Its own neighbor. And then till E gets paid. Okay, and that's how we are going to make this payment, and the balances are updated on all the payment channels. So let's say that D pays A, let's say 0.2. Okay, this is another transaction. Now what's going to happen? Let's just think about it. Let's say that D pays along this particular path, right? Of course, D could pay along this path to H, G, F, B, A, right? Or he could do something even tricky. He could split his 0.2. Part of it he could pay this way, part of it he could pay this way, right? But let's assume that he's found this particular path and he's paying the entire 0.2 along this. So 0.2 gets paid here, 0.2 gets paid here, and 0.2 gets paid here. So what are the balances going to become? Let's just write that down. This is going to become 4.9 and this is going to become 4.1. This is going to become 2.9, this is 1.1. This is going to be 1.9 and this is going to become 1.1. Right? So the various payment channels have to be updated according to the latest balances corresponding to these payments. Right? And after this is done, any one of them can quit, right? Suppose B says, I don't want to have this money locked up with C. I want my 1.1 back. He can just terminate this payment channel and then it's no longer available for other payments in the payment channel network. Right? Or D can say that I am quitting my payment channel with H, right? And he has a spending transaction. So that can be done at any time, right? But right now I'm ignoring that and I'm saying that all these payment channels are valid, right? And I made one payment here, the amounts changed. I made another payment this way and the amounts changed here, right? So D's payment to A did not involve this channel between D and E. So this was not changed at all. Only these particular payment channels got updated. Right? So this is how it's going to work, and then we have to think, what if somebody is malicious? So what if the parties are malicious? So this is what we have to consider. So suppose this is the particular path that we are going to use, right? And we said that initially they had some particular amount. I think it was 1, 2, what was it? 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 5, 1, 1. These are the amounts. And A says, I want to pay, and I pay you 0.1, and he tells B, he tells the full path to all of them, let's say. Right? And so A tells B, you have to pay 0.1 to C, and C has to pay 0.1 to D, and D has to pay 0.1 to E. Right? And so let's say B is honest, so B pays 0.1 to C. And so what's going to happen over here? The balances become this 2.1 and this becomes 0.9. Right? So I'm just saying what happens to these balances. This becomes 3.1. And C does not pay D. Now this is a huge problem. So everybody has initially, let's say, agreed to pay 0.1 across their payment channel so that 0.1 reaches E. But C has decided to be malicious, and he says he gets the money from B, but then he says thank you so much. And now this entire amount is his. So he has 7.1 Bitcoin. And he can quit from both the channels, right? We said that we set up the payment channels initially so that any party can quit. So he can collect his 7.1 and nobody can do anything to him. He hasn't violated any of the Bitcoin rules, right? So why should anybody penalize him? So this is a problem. So what if one of the parties or one or more of the parties is malicious? How are we going to get this to work? Right? Because if A wants to pay E, there should be some guarantee that the money is going to reach E, right? Even if one or more parties tries to cheat. And that's what we will have to figure out. So what we want is that the money should reach E. Let's say the receiver even if one or more parties on the path is malicious. is malicious. So this is a very tricky thing to achieve. I mean, and it looks very impossible to do. I mean, how would we do it? And this is where the brilliance of Poon and Drea comes in, right? So one of the ideas, first of all, is just an individual payment channel. How do you get this thing to work where they make multiple payments to each other in both, possibly in both directions, and at the same time nobody can cheat, right? Nobody can run away with the other's money, or he could refuse, or nobody can refuse for the other party to quit and collect his money, right? But then the question is, across, how do you do this sort of a payment across multiple channels? Because after all, A has no control over CD, what happens over here. So what can he do about it, right? Or E2 has no control over CD. So how are they going to ensure that the money actually flows across unhindered? And what Drea and Poon come up with is something called HTLC, hash time locked contract. So it has to be done very cleverly, and essentially how it's going to work is that somehow these particular payment channels will have to be linked in some way to each other. Okay, so what you will initially do is you will not make the payment, but there will be a promise of the payment. So A says I promise to pay B, B says I promise to pay 0.1, and so on. That happens across all of them. Okay, so let's just write that down. So the first step would be promise to pay 0.1, and this happens everywhere. So a promise is not an actual payment, so nobody has actually paid money, like what I initially said here, A pays B and then somebody else down the line doesn't pay. So we can't do that. So initially you make everybody along the path promise to pay a certain amount. Okay, so they've committed, so to speak, to pay, but they actually haven't paid. And if somebody tries to cheat along the way, then they don't follow through on the promise. Okay. And the second step would be that each party sort of pays only if he has sort of already received money from the others, right? So let's say that okay, so this is a very tricky part. I'll just say right here, tricky. But each party pays the next person. Essentially what we want is that D will pay E only if he's sure that he's going to get the money from C, or he has actually got the money from C. Okay, so that has to be done in a clever way, and that is done using this hash time lock contract. Okay, so they use some sort of a secret sharing method. So essentially this promise has to be kept if the next party has knowledge of a particular secret, right? And so once D has the secret and he shows it to C, C knows that he has to pay, right? But since he has shown that secret to C, C knows that he has the money from B, and so on, right? So we look at the fine details maybe in the next class. Okay, but there are two main concepts here. One is this payment channel between two parties, the channel, and the second is this HTLC. These are the two major inventions which make the Lightning Network work. So we might think, how much does it scale up the transaction throughput? And in theory it's infinite, because after all, I mean, in this sort of a network, they can make arbitrary amounts of payments to each other and nothing is recorded on the blockchain. So you can get, in theory, infinite scalability in transaction throughput. What about the latency? How long does it take for you to get the money? So remember that here the payments are made off the chain. So you don't have to wait for 6 confirmation times or anything like that, like we had on the blockchain. As long as the smart contracts are updated, then I know I have my money. right? If this smart contract from D to D is updated, let's say in 1 second to 1.1, E has already got his money, he's sure about it. So depending on how long it takes to find this path and to update these particular payment channels, that's effectively what the confirmation time is going to be. And there is no such thing as a double spend attack or anything like that, because now this is not going to be recorded on the blockchain. Right? This smart contract is purely between D and D, and as long as somehow the balances have been updated, the payment has been made. Right? So depending on how long it takes to set this, to find this path and so on, that's really what the confirmation time is going to be. So in theory, it can be done instantaneously, of the order of tens of milliseconds, right? Only the network delays are going to affect this, right? But in practice, as my students and I have learned, that it can take a little bit longer, right? Because of other issues. If you want to have anonymity, for example, it becomes tricky, that you may not know how much money is actually there on different channels, right? So that might cause some delay. So A might try a path to E, and maybe it may not work, right? So that's what we find in practice, and then he has to find a new path and so on. But if we get rid of the requirement of anonymity and everybody knows exactly how much is there on any particular path, and if everybody is honest, then the payment can be done really, really fast, in the order of tens of milliseconds, right? Compared to an hour, let's say, on the Bitcoin blockchain. And what about the transaction fees? Well, it could be very low, because after all, what does it cost somebody to update his payment channel from B and C to exchange to update their payment channels to these new amounts? They just have to send a few messages and a few signatures across. So it costs pretty much nothing, right? So they could charge a very, very low fee in order to perform this transaction. So it could be very, very low, and of the order of fractions of a dollar or whatever. So you can actually make micro payments even using the Lightning Network. So Lightning Network was a big thing when it came onto the the world, because people thought from 7 transactions per second, now we are going to infinite, right? And of course, but there are other issues too, which is why me and my students and a lot of people around the world are looking at doing research in the Lightning Network. Okay, so we look at the secret sauce about how exactly you do 1 and 2. How do you set up a payment channel? How do you do an HTLC to ensure that even if somebody is malicious, you don't lose money? Right? So we'll have to see how to do that. We'll look at that in the next lecture.